Hello, so this session is all about creating an online presence. So with me today is Angela Durrant, and I have known Angela for many years, and we've had lots of conversations about presence, about charisma, about articulating your story, your voice, and getting noticed. So Angela's a perfect person to talk to today. So before we get stuck in, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Angela?
Yeah, I have been a fan of Paula's for a long, long time. Right the way back when I first sort of started, I had this understanding that somehow I had to be visible. I had to be able to show that visibility in one way or another. And Paula came into my world and has been in and out of my world for a long time. And I did the very thing that many people don't do is I actually just did what you said, didn't I, at the
Mm.
start, and it worked brilliantly. So I trained as a voice coach, and I spent the last 8, 9 years working as a voice coach. First of all for musicians and singers, and then from about 2012, the first person came to me. Had emailed me, and I got very curious because I wasn't marketing in business at all, and said, I've got an internal interview and I don't think I'm going to do very well. Can you help me? And I got very curious at that point. So I did help this person in 2012, and he came for an hour, sorted out how he was telling the story, but telling the story of himself and what he needed to say in that internal interview. And he had to do an actual presentation with that as well. And the next day he came back to me and said, I just wanted to tell you that they thought I had the best presentation, and I got the job. And then I got very curious and I started to work more and more with people around in business around how to be the person that other people pay attention to, how to stand out. That kind of culminated in about 2017, and I really wasn't doing anything big with it until 2016-17. I ended up doing some work for the Ministry of Defence, first of all for a lady who didn't know how to speak up in meetings and felt very shy, and after that into their women's group, and then finally into their senior leaders of how to actually present change within their organisation. And of course my light bulb went on and thought, really, I really need to kind of pivot in lots of different ways and take my work into some different areas. And so 2019 I began Maverick Communication with the express idea of kind of creating that little bit of separations for those people that didn't necessarily have the creative brain to see the voice coach in the music industry also had some relevance in business as well. And so up to this date where we are now, I've worked with NHS managers to directors all around this idea of communication. So it's not just, about getting the interview and getting into a place, as well as creating that level of impact and influence so that people remember you, is kind of non-specific as to what it is. It kind of falls from senior leaders right through to people doing an interview, right through to people trying to get their message out and sell their products and services. It's maybe just the context that it's different, and maybe just the application and how we need to approach those things. So in the middle of lockdown, like a lot of people, had a lot of rethinking as well, and wanted to create a space for self-employed people. So I created something called the Visible Club to help self-employed people actually navigate their visibility. And we've actually got people in the Visible group that are at the moment employed, but are wanting to go self-employed at some point, and they want to actually get a handle on that. So I think the relevance for me around how you influence and how you become memorable to people is there's an across the board application that through my years of training and working with people, I often see that I'm using the same things and I'm saying the same things, but maybe the context is different. So I hope that's helpful.
So, so thinking about interviews in particular, when you're in front of somebody, it is easier to make an impression, isn't it? You've got the handshake, you've got the eye contact. Sometimes there is just this connection that happens when you hit it off with somebody. Obviously, at the moment in October 2020, most interviews are happening online or over the telephone. So it is more difficult. I mean, I suppose the only good thing to say is everybody's going through that, so it's a level playing field. But so where do we start? From the very moment when you start that Zoom conversation, how can you make your impression?
Well, I kind of just want to dial back to just some things that take some of the stress out of doing things online to
Mm.
people that are not used to it. First of all, let's just talk about some very quick practical things, and you might have already covered these with people, but it makes a difference even to your level of confidence about how you suddenly have less of a busy mind, or less of your own sort of self-concern on your mind in the moment, as it were, and your insecurities, is if you are not used to using an online platform, if they're using a platform that you're not used to, grab a friend or somebody and have a practice beforehand. There is, all good performers rehearse before they actually go onto the stage. So don't give yourself any more stress in the situation by kind of winging it and hoping for the best, because I don't think that's helpful in making those first impressions. We tend to make a non-verbal filtering judgment about people within the first 3 to 10 seconds. We decide if we want to listen to somebody, we decide if we want to pay attention to somebody. And there's a great quote by an acting coach called Patsy Rodenberg, and she says that before we even enter, even as we enter a room, before we've even stood up to speak or maybe even said a word on Zoom, people around us have already decided whether to lend us their ears or give us their respect. So before you've even started that interview that you've prepared for, there's a first impression. So you want to set yourself up to be able to come in with a level of that sort of confidence. I don't mean arrogance, I mean just like that confidence where you go, I can handle the tech in front of me. I've got some light on the subject, and the easiest way is to have a light. You can see kind of I've got one here, as it were, on next to me. If you do any of this with video, but just to actually have literally some light on the subject. To make sure that you can be heard. One of the biggest problems that I've encountered being online at the minute is physically, vocally, that maybe the computer or the tech that somebody has, the voice is sounding like they're in the bath or they're distant, and so they might not even be heard. And then unfortunately you're almost playing into the hands of people's innate filtering capacity to go, oh, this isn't going to go well, because your interviewer is in their own head as much as you're in your own head. And you want to make sure that we take out as many what I call obvious distractions as we possibly can at the start, to make it easier for somebody to fall into a level of calibration and connection with us, because that's where the real magic is going to happen. You can tell your story and start to connect and feel that sort of connection with the interviewer on the line. So there's nothing for me like getting a bit of competence around, can you be heard? And if you are used to using Zoom, or for some people they might have to buy a really cheap USB microphone and plug it into the back of the computer, or not necessarily what I've seen people turn up with the Madonna headphones. I've got to be truthful, I don't find them easy, because I've often said to people, we can hear you breathing through your nose, we can hear lots of other things, and it's kind of like it just adds to the distraction. So I would say, first of all, for people, wipe off at least 50% stress by being able to turn on that thing, knowing that they can hear you, they can see you, and that you can actually handle simply that tech in front of you. You would be surprised at just that level of competence is enough to deal with the first 7 to 10 seconds. The second bit is, as small as this sounds, when you first sort of get online with your interviewer or the panel or whoever it is in front of you, a big smile with the word hello. I used to train people in call centres and say, look, it all stops at hello. If you're on the telephone and you hear somebody go, oh, good morning, oh, hello, and the voices drop down, or conversely we go the opposite in nervous energy and we go, hello, it's kind of like, we're like, oh my god, we've kind of got that nervous energy, and it's either dragging us back into our sort of insecurity, or we're making an over impression, an over effort, as it were, to try and make that first thing. So if you find that you tend to use too much breath, or you get overexcited with your first hello, take a big breath before you actually kind of go in and let it out, so that you can then sort of say, good morning, hello. So it becomes a sort of bright, medium sort of easygoing, this person is, you know, is not showing me that they have swung either side of the pendulum of over enthusiastic or utterly nervous and in their own head. Does that make sense as a start off? Because everything else flows from that first impression, and it doesn't actually take much to create it. Actually, it doesn't take a big deal. Everybody has the capacity to smile and say hello, to sort of let that nervous energy out, or conversely, if you feel like you're shy, to just practice saying it with a little bit more energy, as if you are, you know, just, it's a friend that you're looking forward, like you've got a surprise, you're waiting for the postman, the front door opens and you go, hi, hello. And it might be natural or not quite natural, but we've all had incidences where we're quite happy to say that word hello. And if we are mindful that it makes that interviewer, they're at ease too when they realize that they don't have to baby this interviewee at the start of that process, I think.
Yeah. No, I think it's really wise words about sorting the tech out. I know I'm, you know, very comfortable on Zoom, Skype, you know, obviously we've all been Skyping for years now, but when I get an invitation to do Microsoft Teams, my heart sinks, because you know, half the time there's some little issue that's going to go on. So
and it's often the things that you're not used to. As I say, like, I'm not particularly used to Microsoft Teams, I'm used to Zoom and Skype, etc. But if it's a piece of tech that you're not used to, then just familiarize yourself. It feels practical to me.
Yeah. Great. So obviously, hello. And it's amazing actually how easy we forget to do that online, isn't it?
Yeah. I know. It sounds like, really, are you paid to tell people to say hello? But can you see the only reason why we don't remember the really simple stuff? I mean, it's like Einstein says, isn't it? You know, anybody can confuse the issue. It takes a genius to simplify it. So I'm going to just sit in the role of genius this morning and say, you know, hello matters in just that moment. It's that bit. Imagine, like, you know, the performer coming on stage. When if you've kind of watched a performer or you've seen somebody come on stage, they come on with a bright smile or a cheery look, unless they're actually trying to play a character that's not meant to be like that. But on the whole, all comedians, they come on with a smile. They come on with a kind of, I'm happy to see you, you know, and it's that, it's kind of planned, you know, that plan. You can have I kind of call a spontaneous happening, you know, a planned spontaneous happening is that first hello. And it can put you at ease too. It's almost like having a 30-second pitch, or the first thing that you say, and practicing it. As soon as you've got that and you've got that dialed in, it's so much easier for you to relax into everything else. Otherwise, you're battling your own psychology right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so hello, first step to building presence. And I think the thing about building presence online is, in an interview, why it's so difficult is because it's almost like they've got the upper hand, they're in control. So what's next after hello?
I think it goes right into that particular point, is whilst depending on where you come from, you can be feeling that it's the first interview you've had, you can be feeling like it's the 20th and you've just got rejection after rejection. What's really important here is to understand that to be at your most powerful, to be most present with people, you have to bring that situation into a place of equality immediately. Because to be in a state of what we call in the theatre sort of first circle or third circle. Third circle is where I've just gone in all guns blazing, as it were, and I'm almost trying to sort of batter the interviewer down with my energy and my stories and my effort, as it were, you know. And at that point it's all give, as it were, it's all outward. I'm not able to listen back to the nuance, as it were. We're not in a place of equality. I'm trying to sort of, you know, batter them down with my efforts.
Broadcasting, isn't it? Yeah.
Being ultra bold, it's like, you know, fake it till you make it moment. And we know that that's not really authentic. A lot of people might come from what I call the first circle position, where they actually almost feel as if that person has the upper hand. They are in control of my life. They're in control of the yes and the no. And I have no power. And that's where we're into first. We're in and of ourselves, and we're not going to bring ourselves into true presence at that point, because we're actually throwing away our power into the hands of the other person. If you've ever actually kind of got through a job interview and got a job and then realised within the first 6 months that it wasn't the job you wanted, then actually you've got to bring yourself into a place of presence and power and equality. So true presence is where you feel equal to the other person in front of you. So to some degree, you having the questions, having the idea that you are as well, you're interviewing them to see if this is the company that is going to be the right move for you as much as the other way around. That little that ability to kind of go, I'm actually going to share my, I'm going to share my stories. I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of go through this interview, but to recognize that actually when you're really in true presence, you realize that you are not powerless in this situation. It is not all in the hands of another person. If you really, even if you really, really want the job, the way to actually get that is to have that relaxed sense of quiet confidence in yourself that actually I might get this job, I might get 2 jobs this week, even if I've had nothing else in the pipeline at all. It's like auditions used to happen for singers. You got no clue at the end of the day what's actually going to happen. But every single time you've got to go in with the idea that even if I got this, I might get another opportunity, and this might not be the right one for me. I need to make sure that I'm auditioning them or interviewing them, and I'm asking the right questions that are going to give me an understanding whether it's the right next move for me and my family. Because to get a job and then to suddenly have to leave it within a certain amount of time or put up with it, and then explain that in the further interview in 6 or 12 months time or 2 years time, that's another explanation you don't need. So to come into presence, you have to ground yourself. And what that means is if you're sitting in the chair and you're sitting virtually, not slumping down, not feeling powerless within yourself, but to actually realize that this is an opportunity for you to articulate and share and ask questions and bring yourself into the space with the other person where your goal is to actually connect with them so that you feel as if you are comfortable enough to ask the right questions and answer the questions truthfully that they want. And what that presence is really about, it's about a focus that's not on you. If we're in hyperactivity, as it were, we're trying to impress people, third circle energy, we're not listening and we're just trying to be impressive. And there's nothing less impressive than somebody trying to be impressive. That's it, isn't it? There's just nothing less impressive than that. If we're feeling powerless, we've just believed a whole load of insecure thinking in our own heads that says, I have no influence here. I've just got to take what I'm given. I've got to try and, just make the best of this, etc. Or I've already come with an idea that, I'm not good enough. What if I can't do it? Well, that's none of that is true. It's all made up. So to bring yourself into the place of almost curiosity and go, well, I wonder how this is going to turn out then. I wonder what's going to happen here. I wonder how, what they're going to ask me. I've got certain things prepared. And part of, I think, what's important is to, once you've done a few interviews, you're going to get pretty wise to some of the questions are pretty similar. Not all interviewers are very good interviewers either. I had senior managers talk to me in the summer and say the interviewer was appalling. So you're not even necessarily going to get a great interviewer. They might not be very confident in their own interviewing skills. So the more that you can, when I say calibrate and connect to people, it's about focusing on the other person in front of you. We can all read whether somebody is confident, competent, and even if somebody doesn't look as if they're giving that much away, sit in your own space when you kind of have that bit where you go, I've got this. I can't be impressive to somebody else. They're going to decide whether they're impressed or not. That's not in my control. What's in my control right now is how I want to speak about my achievements, the things that I've prepared that I want to draw out, and anything that I've had in other previous interviews that's maybe floored me. And that I actually want to make sure that when I get that question again, I answer it in the way that I want to. Is that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. I know before we actually started this call, we had a brief chat about, the things that you actually do want to get over. And we mentioned your message and your story. Are they two different things? And how would you do that?
That's an interesting question. Let's take story first of all. Many people struggle with the idea of telling the story of them, as it were. But if we put it simply, if you I look at it, and if you think of it as more what I call the timelines and the turning points. particularly in jobs that you've had, if you're, you know, looking at the timelines and the turning points, there'll be particular projects that you've worked on, moments where, you know, you've brought a sale in, or a particular client, or you've done some work, or you've had an accolade in there. Those are your timelines and your turning points. If you can list some of those down, but take it one step further, because some people just, it's a bit like salespeople, they just talk about the features and the benefits, as it were. If you take the story idea one step further and go, this was the situation, for instance, you had been part of a team that won a big contract, and you go, well, it wasn't me, it was the whole team that was doing it, I'll just talk about my part in the team. Take it one step further. Think about, you played a role in that. You know, what was it? Was it that you actually were able to bring everybody together in the meeting? Was it that you actually made sure that you did the backup and facilitated the backup? And what was the, and think about the cost of not having that. Your what's the word? It's not commitment to it, but your ability to do that part in the role, in that journey, your sort of contribution, that's the word, your contribution in that. So my words failed me on that moment, but you will have a contributory factor within that, and it will be because of your innate skills, the things that are a bit like the nose on your face, that you go, well, surely everybody can do that. No, you've got to tell the story of if that wasn't in place, if those backup systems weren't in place, if you weren't able to read the numbers in the way that you were able to, and they were going to make a decision that actually took them in a different direction, but you were able to bring that meeting round into a particular direction and show them why those numbers mattered and what to do instead. It's those little details as part of the story, what we call colour and advance. So if you're, advance means like, I did this and I did that and I did this and I did that. That's kind of like the advance bit. The timeline bits. The turning points are what I call where you colour in the story as to what happened if you hadn't have done that. How did that make a difference to that particular contract at the time? It's a bit like a child having a, you know, colouring book, and you've got the lines around the colouring book, and your job is to colour in the story in the way that you want to. Some people they get into waffling, and they are all colour, and they've got no lines around the drawing, so they start to get into the emotion or the feeling. So you're going to be kind of maybe fall into one or the other. I'm a bit of a colorist, as it were. Love story, worked with story and as a singer all my life, so I know when I'm kind of, I can feel when I'm going, and he said that, and he did this, and that happened, and this happened. Well, that's kind of too much color, and it doesn't give any framework to the and context to what your role was within that situation that you're talking about. So all it takes for us to be able to do what I call the framework and then the colouring in is to think of those, list those situations, those awards, those moments where you go, that highlighted my skill, that highlighted my leadership, that highlighted my innovation and my ability, or my ability to kind of bring team together, whatever it is that you're wanting to talk about. And then just take it one step further and go, if that wasn't there, if I hadn't have been able to do that, what could have happened to that situation? And by doing that, what did it cause to happen as a result? Those are what we call the return on investments. Those are the things that show an interviewer that you can think slightly deeper, slightly differently, slightly outside the box. And when you prepare a couple of those things, and I would suggest you do it in just bullet points, not necessarily written out verbatim, you'll know yourself just by thinking about it that it's just asking what I call really good quality questions of yourself to go, if I hadn't have played that contribution, what could have happened? Well, Mavis nearly was going to go with, she wasn't looking at the data right, and they nearly went out and put another, you know, X amount of ad spend on that, and I was able to show them that actually we could do this another way and save, you know, X amount of percentage at the same time, and this was the end result. When you can tell the story behind the data and the story behind the details, the cost of not of what would happen if you didn't do what you did, and the return or the transformation or the result that happened as a result of you doing it, that shows an interviewer, or shows people, that you really can see different aspects, and they can see that you understand the roles and the responsibilities that you can play.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if the story is a good thing to think about, you know, when they ask you, you know, what's your biggest weakness, or when have you made a mistake, or what's been your failure. Um, you know,
Be
telling the
careful.
story, but also including the learning points in there. Like, I
Yeah,
would do this differently next time.
it is, and make it in your favour. I always say make those weak points in your favour. If it's a timekeeping issue or a, I've had, I think I remember somebody sort of saying to me once, you've had 10 jobs in 10 months or something. Does that show any level of consistency to us, kind of thing? If we don't know how to turn those kind of mistakes into what I call, there's a mess. Let's talk about the message, okay?
Mm.
The story. If we actually kind of separate it and think, make your mess your message,
Yeah.
because half of the word message is the word mess and the other half is age, in which case we can actually talk about that and make it a good message at any age, really. And you can, but you've got to kind of frame it in a way that shows that you have learnt the lessons and that you're not going to bring that mess into the next company or organization.
Mm. Mm.
And I think it's really looking and going, okay, you know and again, if you know that there's an area that is what I call, think something that you haven't got a handle on yet, talk about a different one that you have.
Yeah. Yes.
Be selective in your messes that you bring to the table, I would say.
Yeah.
Don't wear all your shirts at the same time.
I suppose the other thing I would say from personal experience as an interviewer is, if you are telling the story about something that you've done, make sure that you really have done it. And that because if they're interested and drawn into your story, they will ask questions, and you need to know and be able to back that up, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, and that, that is, yeah, absolutely. You can't sit there and talk about the whole team if you just literally made the tea.
I've seen it happen. I've seen
But
it.
but again, that's no different. I remember an auditioner. I don't think it's any different in any industry. I remember an auditioner sort of saying, if you're putting your CV in front of the audition panel, don't tell them that you can tap dance, because they'll ask you to do that if you can't. Which I think is a good analogy. So if you're gonna tell them you can tap dance, make sure you can.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's so true. So true. Okay, so hopefully you've said hello, you've built a connection, you've told your story, you've explained your message. So you've had time to ask questions to see if this job is the right one for you. So things are winding up now. People often say to me that they're really not sure what to do at the end. So they wave, they would do wave in real life. How do you wind it up in a way that is natural, but also still you end on a good note? Any thoughts?
Oh, that's really funny, especially particularly as you can't do a virtual handshake or anything, can
Mm.
you? Which is quite amusing, really. I think that there is, what comes to mind is that there are natural pauses in all conversations, as it were. And there's often a natural pause. Sometimes I think sometimes people get nervous of those natural pauses and they want to keep talking.
Mm.
Other people get scared of those natural pauses and they just clam up and make, and kind of make it hard for the interview. If you've ever spoken to somebody who's kind of almost yes, no kind of thing and doesn't sort of fall in with the conversation, it's kind of like pulling teeth. It's hard work. So I think for me, I think one of the good questions, and I think it kind of comes from even doing sales and doing sales training or sales things online, is to maybe have a question that you can, if it's coming to one of those natural pauses at the end and you don't know what to do, the questions have gone, etc. And they say, they'll often say to you, I think, is almost like, is there anything you want to ask me? That's probably one of the last things that comes out, isn't it? Is there anything you want to ask me? I think, kind of good positive question there, rather than just like, oh no, kind of like no, would be potentially to have what I call a positive forward-facing question in there, a bookend, as it were. Hello being the first bookend and this being the last bookend. One of the things what I'd often say to people is, can I ask when you're making your decision from here? Like, when are you making your decision?
a really good one because
I used it in a sale the other day, so I don't think it makes a difference whether, you know, I was speaking to somebody who'd said, well, I'm speaking to you, Angela, and I'm speaking to another lady. And so I was very mindful of saying, of kind of saying, look, I also know, I know that you're speaking to somebody else about this, you know, position or this role. I think it's just a slightly different context. And I found myself saying at the end, because I realized that you have to close, like it's a good thing to positively pull in that close. And so I found myself saying, okay, because we're in that hiatus, where do we go from here? You
yeah.
might be speaking to somebody else behind me. I found myself saying, okay, do you know when you are, you know, when are you going to be likely to be making your decision,
Mm.
or you know, what is your decision making process for here? When will I, you know, how will you be working this from this point on? You know, and I like the idea of when are you going to be making your decision, because what that did for me was not only at that point she just stopped and she said, well, I've just made it and I want to work with you, which was absolutely pretty brilliant, you know,
Yeah.
because you never know when that's going to happen. But for me, it was kind of like this, it's kind of like a closing question, almost like that sort of like toe in the water bit that any salesperson would do to kind of say, well, are we getting close to this? How do I know? How can I kind of make the parameters from here? Where am I going to follow up at this point? Do I need to wait for you to get back to me? How many more people are you going to speak to from me? But to actually say, you know, when are you going to be making your decision regarding this role?
Yeah.
When are you going to be making your decision? For me, feels a very proactive way to almost say to the interviewer, you know, it sort of, they then can actually say, this is our decision making process. You are then, for me, almost like kind of come into that coda part. It's a bit like a coda in a piece of music. It's not quite the end, but it's that bit where you kind of go, when are you making your decision? Brilliant, thank you. And then they can say, we're making it on Friday and we'll let you know. There becomes like and then at the end it's like, thank you very much, I can look forward to hearing from you. It's not then that hiatus, it's almost like that little thing that you can do to give yourself some idea as to what's going on, and also maybe at the same time get some feedback and some information from them at the same time.
Yeah.
That's what came to mind.
Yeah, no, I like that. And also, you know, if the job that you're going for is going to involve any type of sales or decision making or influencing, it shows them that you can, you know, you can ask the right questions and push things forward a little bit.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So thank you, Angela. That
My
was
pleasure.
really interesting. And all Angela's details are going to be below this video, so you can contact her there via her LinkedIn profile. And so on. So brilliant. Thank you, Angela. That was really useful.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Paul.
Bye.